Welcome to Flipped Classroom. Today's lesson is using sourced material effectively and appropriately. We will be selecting and integrating quoted passages. The student learning outcomes and objectives for today's lesson will focus on having students to be able to parenthetically reference sources used in a paper and to be able to integrate credible sources using appropriate formatting standards. To begin with, let's look at when it's a good time to use a quotation as opposed to paraphrasing or summarizing. There are 6 main times. 1. Expert declaration. 2. Direct support. 3. Effective language. 4. To add historical flavor. 5. For a specific example. Or 6. A controversial statement. So over here you will see an example of when it's a good time to use a quote. There are so many individuals in our society that don't have opportunities, said Thomas Green, who was raised in the Chicago suburbs and now is ARC's president. Every student can learn under the right circumstances, Green told the Sacramento Business Journal. There are some important do's and don'ts when quoting passages. Do use a memorable passage. Also, it should be fairly short. You don't want to have a data dump where you're taking long passages and inserting them without any context. You may also want to use a quoted passage if it's a unique word or phrase. For example, Rush Limbaugh uses his unique phrase, mainstream media. Or Beyonce uses her own jargon when she uses bootylicious. If you tried to change those words, you would lose that unique flavor. But you shouldn't quote if you're able to paraphrase or summarize. It's often better because direct quotes can be confusing. Often they're too long, or the jargon is too difficult to grasp. Let's look at an example of one of the famous quotes from 1982. Senator, I served Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy, Benson quipped at his opponent. If you were going to try to paraphrase that or summarize that, you would lose the unique voice that Lloyd Benson was trying to use. When integrating quotes and passages, there also are some do's and don'ts. For example, you would want a launch statement to add credibility. Also, you need to add context and analysis, in addition to a parenthetical citation. You do not want to have a floating quote where there's no context, which would leave your reader wondering. And you wouldn't want to end your paragraph with a quote either, because that floating quote would have no analysis. Let's take a look at an example. In the 1988 election, George Bush was accused of selecting Dan Quayle as his running mate because Quayle was youthful and handsome, which was in stark contrast to Lloyd Benson's rough old man appearance. Some critics argued that Quayle was all looks and no substance. Notice how they give context to the "You're no Jack Kennedy" famous quote. Let's take a look ahead. In Monday's class, we will be selecting quotes. We'll be finding memorable passages and or words. We'll be selecting quotes that would otherwise have lost their meaning if an alternative approach is used. In Wednesday's class, we will be launching the quotes, learning how to write lead-ins and adding context. Thank you for joining me today in Flipped Classroom.